Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Emblem Support Podcast. I am your host, Ordo, and I'm joined today by my A+ support partner, Cardwiz.
Build an army, trust nobody, except for us. Glad to have you back for another episode of the Emblem Support Podcast.
Another episode? I'm pretty sure this is our Chapter 1, good sir.
Ah, yes, but the true Fire Emblem fans would know that there is always a prologue chapter.
Ah, of course. I should have known this. So, but
if this is your first episode, it's okay. You don't have to listen to it. Any episode can be the first episode. You need to go in treating it like that.
Yep. So, this is pretty much a fresh start. If you didn't listen to the prologue, basically, we just rambled and we're trying to get our feeling for what we were going to do. But today I've actually recorded. I've actually taken down some nice little notes for what we're going to talk about. And so I guess we'll start, Mr. Cardwiz, by letting the listener, know what we've been playing or what we've been watching.
Well, recently I took advantage of, it's just after Thanksgiving as we're recording this to date this, and I just took advantage of some Black Friday sales, and I didn't really find anything I liked, so I bought a bunch of really old Wii U and 3DS games that I'd never played before. I've been delving into, I started up Xenoblade Chronicles X about 2 hours into that, and it's something. I like the battle system. I hate the characters. I hate the animations. I hate a lot of it, but I'm going to try to at least put another hour or two into it so I can actually get into exploring the world. Also got the Paper Mario game on Wii U. I haven't opened it yet. And I also got with the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee coming out, I've been on a mini Pokemon kick, so I've got myself a game I've never played before, Pokemon not Omega Ruby, the other one, Alpha Sapphire. It never played that generation on Game Boy Advance, so I got it on 3DS, and so far I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the Pokemon, enjoying all the water, even though there's too much of it, according to the internet. But I'm having a good time. Having a good time in a little bit of a nostalgia land as I get ready to prepare for more Fire Emblem in the future.
Sounds pretty good. What do you think of that? What do you think of the theme song for Xenoblade X? You know, the Black Tar, whatever song it is that plays whenever you fight somebody.
I'm enjoying the song well enough. That nothing has really stood out about Xenoblade Chronicles X so far, sadly. I'm kind of enjoying like the MMO-ish sort of aspect of it. It's just like, after every couple of battles I'm picking up new equipment and I switch it out. And I can see the equipment switch out. And I just recently unlocked like your secondary class, and I see on the menu system that there seem to be like 4 subclasses to each thing. So that system does intrigue me because I do like that sort of system. I do love job systems in a sense, but so far it hasn't grabbed me. I've already played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and this just seems like a much weaker battle system and much worse character design. So I don't know how much more I'm going to put into it, but I'm going to try.
Yeah, the thing I always hear about Xenoblade Chronicles X is that it's more about the exploration than it is the characters and the story part of it. So I mean, yep. I can't really say too much else about it. Like I always wanted to pick it up, and I was kind of hyped for it, but its release date and me just didn't. It just never came for me.
Yeah, just being a little ways into it, I can see why the exploration's good, but I'm in the start of like all JRPGs where I'm in the tutorial, and hopefully in a couple of hours I can actually get to the actual game.
Yeah, but if you remember Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I mean, once you reach Chapter 7, they're still giving you, like, not as much, but there's still, like, a thing like, oh, yeah, here's one more thing you can do. It's just like, oh, God, please, stop.
Yeah, the problem with the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 tutorials is that some of them were actually really important, but there were so many of them, I droned them out as it went along. So by the time I was just like, wait, how am I supposed to do these breaks? What is that weird orb that's circling the enemy right now? What's going on? I'm so confused.
Yeah, I mean, it's typical JRPGs. But as far as me, I've been playing Kingdom Hearts: Birth by Sleep. I finally finished Aqua's Path because I actually picked up the entire series, which isn't pretty simple to do. No reason not to play this good series.
Was that the one that was originally on Vita?
PSP.
PSP.
Yeah, I mean, I played it before on the PlayStation 3 collection, but I was just like, I'll just buy all the collection, just have it on PS4. So I just finished the last little bit of it. I think I have the last episode to do, and then I'll be completely finished with that. And then as far as Black Friday goes, the only thing I picked up was Life is Strange. It's not 2, it's the other one, the prequel.
Before the Storm?
Yeah, that's it. It was like, I think like the special deluxe version was like $10. I was just like, that's pretty much a steal. I did enjoy the first one, so I haven't got to play it yet. I'll probably do it after I'm done recording this, but other than that, moving on, here's something that I really wanted to do, and I actually posted this on the Twitter account. You and I are super passionate about this series, and what we really want to do with this podcast. With that said, though, there are gaps in our knowledge, and sometimes we actually do miss a few things. So if you ever have any corrections for us, drop them in the comments or send them up through our Twitter account called Emblem Supports. Yes, I finally found an @ that I was happy with today. And with that said, I caught a few, actually caught a couple of corrections for us to do. Last week we were talking about the things that were in Smash Brothers, since we were just coming off that Smash Direct. So I missed Tiki and the Black Knight being assist trophies now. And for whatever reason, I kept saying, oh yeah, there's 8 Fire Emblem characters. There's 8 Fire Emblem characters when we were talking about our Smash Brothers 7. And so I wanted to do a correction for that, personally. So here's the characters that I've listed that I would actually choose for Fire Emblem. If you remember, my question to you, the audience, was that, if you could replace, or you could choose, 7 Fire Emblem characters instead of the ones that we have, give us a shout out and tell us, what characters you would actually like, with the exception of Marth. Marth has to stay because he's like the guy. He's your Mario. He's your Link. So, excuse me. Here's who I chose. I chose Ike, Roy, Corrin, replace Lucina with Celica, wow, okay, I'm sorry, my handwriting is really bad. Sorry, replace Robin with Celica, so you can still have, magic and sword play, but maybe lean her a bit more towards magic than swords. Put in Lynn, because she's super popular, but give her instead of just making her a sword user, maybe mix her in with bows as well, because she can have bows as her upgraded class. And then the last one I have Ephraim, because I love GBA games, and he has a lance, so I would have 1, 2, 3, yeah, whatever, that's what I put.
Yeah, when we were doing the conversation in the prologue episode, I brought up the list of the Smash Brothers characters, and we kept saying 8 for some reason. I just kept going through a list of characters, just like, I'm only counting 7. I'm either missing one, or Incineroar was a secret Fire Emblem character that I'm not remembering, but I should have said something at the time.
Incineroar's a Laguz. We should have put that out.
Oh, that's right. He was in the Project Steam crossover.
Yeah.
But my 7 Fire Emblem characters are pretty much the same as yours for the same reasons, although I did end up switching out Roy for Lucina, because Awakening was the game that sort of revived Fire Emblem and saved the franchise to a degree, so that game should get some representation. And Lucina's a good character, plus I like the masked Marth, quote, Marth, alt costume.
I wish we could have kept that. I hate how her taunt is just, she'll put on the mask and immediately throw it away. It's just like, why can't we just keep that on?
Yeah, it should be an alternate costume. There's no reason why it shouldn't be.
I mean, almost every single character, that we're for Fire Emblem could have an alternate costume instead of I guess it's more than Fire Emblem. It's the entire roster. A lot of those characters could have alternate costumes and such.
Yeah, and it's just like it doesn't seem like a little mask like that would make a big difference. But I mean, like Mario's getting like a hard hat. He's getting is he getting the tuxedo outfit? He's
Yeah.
getting a number of outfits which are changing the sprite a tiny bit. So I wouldn't think that would be an issue. But
Yeah.
whatever. I'm not in charge of programming at Smash.
Yeah, it is what it is. And, you have a roster of, 70 plus fighters. So, I mean, hey, no complaints from me. So here, we're not really rushing that through, but we're actually going to move on to the main part of the podcast. This is our chapter 1. This is our official start to this podcast, and I think what's a better way to talk about Fire Emblem than good ways to actually start the franchise? Because I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, what about if the person who's listening has a mild interest in Fire Emblem, but they're not really sure where to start? So I figured we would give our 2 cents on what are good ways to get into the franchise.
Well, personally, I would recommend the one that got me into the Fire Emblem 7. It has the Lyn story mode, which is the prologue and the first 10 chapters of the game, and it works as an excellent tutorial. If you've never played a strategy game like that before, if you've never played a Fire Emblem game, that is a very strong tutorial that tells you a lot of the mechanics that you need to know about how the battle works, that gives you the weapon triangle, teaches you about archers, flying units, how the magic works, promotions. It does a very good job of laying the groundwork for everything you need to know. So
yeah, but I agree. It's just called Fire Emblem 2003, I guess, if you want to call it that. Fire Emblem 7, Blazing Sword, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's an excellent prologue. It's a good way to get into the series. Lyn mode is, it's people say, oh, it's just a glorified tutorial, but if you're going with someone who's never played with a franchise before, definitely go and give it a try, because I think it's excellent. And then once you start chapter 11, you get to the real story. It's also a really good story as well. I think as far as availability goes, though, Fire Emblem Awakening, obviously, it's simple to get into. The story is okay. It also teaches you those mechanics. Like I said, the big thing for me with Awakening is that it's very easy to get a hold of. It's out there, it's available digitally, it's available physically. The 3DS is still hot right now. I say it's still hot, but you know what I mean. It's easy to get a hold of.
I've got one in my hands right now, going through some wild grass. Oh no! What am I about to catch? What am I about to catch? It is that weird green lightning dog thing.
Yes,
Electric.
Yes, I love him. Birthright's also kind of an easy one too. Again, it's very easy to get a hold of. It only came out a couple of years ago, so I would not recommend Conquest. Conquest is more of the, hey, you've been here for a while, you know what's happening. I don't recommend that, or the what's called the third path for the Fate series Revelations. I don't recommend that either.
It is very hardcore, very extreme. Not for babies.
Too much for us. But you and I actually had an interesting off mic conversation about whether Fire Emblem Echoes was a good one to get started with, and I don't think we ever came to a good conclusion about it.
I think it is a good entry point because it is fairly traditional Fire Emblem, but it also has those sort of interesting dungeon crawling elements, which if someone has never played a Fire Emblem game, never played a real strictly strategy turn-based game, that could be a way to sort of, I don't want to say trick people to get involved, but influence that part of the brain so it's oh, I'm going around a dungeon, I'm familiar with this, I know how this works. It's just a little thing, but it's one mechanic that I actually really liked from the game, and I think it is something that could appeal to the eye of some, quote, casual people who have never played a Fire Emblem game before.
I don't know.
Plus, the story and characters are good and has a good art style.
I don't know. I was kind of on the. I disagreed with it because I was just well, Echoes is very different. It's the remake of the second game in the series, and it doesn't have things that the other Fire Emblem games have, such as the weapon triangle, and other Fire Emblem games don't have the dungeon crawling experience. Now, I did say, like, if you were familiar with, like, a Tales series game, you might feel right at home with this, because it has, like, it has that map that you explore, and then you have kind of like monsters that you can encounter on the overworld map, and then once you encounter those monsters, then you're pulled into like the Fire Emblem gameplay. But I don't know, I just don't think it's a good entry. I think, like, if you've played a couple of titles and have those underneath your belt, then yeah, definitely jump to Echoes for maybe your second or third game.
I would agree that it could work like that. But if I wanted to bring people in casually who would just look on from afar and say, oh, I can vaguely see myself interested in that, who might be turned off by just the standard turn-based, all the characters and the sword and sorcery, the easiest way to get into it would be the way that Nintendo is getting people into it. Fire Emblem Heroes. It's just about the quintessential mobile phone app game with a gacha system, which is actually fair for a gacha system. It's very simple turn-based strategy that can get really deep if you really want to delve into it.
Trust me.
It is, yeah. Oh yeah. I put about 2 months into that game, and I could see how it could become a really deep experience with the transferring of skills and such like that to create the optimal teams. But it is a good casual mobile gacha game, and I assume that has brought people in. It certainly brought the money in for Nintendo, and I would certainly hope that's translated into sales for them.
I mean, I have seen a few people that have been like, oh yeah, I started with Heroes and I went out and I was able to get a 3DS and Fire Emblem Awakening, or I already had a 3DS, so I just picked up Fire Emblem Awakening because it was so easy to get a hold of. And so, I mean, yeah, that's definitely Heroes is definitely a good entry point too. And the thing with Heroes is that, I mean, everyone in this day and age, especially if you're listening to this, you have a smartphone. So just like go download it and give it a try. And if you like it, maybe jump onto the quote unquote real Fire Emblem games. But one thing I will say about the 3DS titles though, is that they do have casual mode. Because, permadeath is a thing that a lot of people are just like, oh, permadeath, I can't play with that.
Yeah, after playing the GBA games and the GameCube ones, it's hard to imagine a game without permadeath, but that's probably a good casual way to get people in. Just like, oh, you lost the character just for that map. It's okay. And I will say, a game I recently got that I didn't mention earlier, I got Fire Emblem Warriors on Switch, and I must say, I absolutely went casual mode because the permanent death mode in that one is more BS because I don't really like relying on the AI, and the cost is way too expensive, especially in the early game for that.
Sorry, good sir. I couldn't. I had to go classic mode with that. I lost Minerva pretty early on. I lost Minerva, and it's like, oh, it's going to cost you like 300G to get her back. I was like, are you kidding me? So, for the most part, while I was leveling up characters and a few of the DLC characters, I didn't have Minerva. I was just like, well, sorry, Minerva.
Yeah, it's like 300,000 and like 5 golden items, which are not easy to get early on. Like maybe if you put like 50 to 100 hours into the game, that is a drop in the bucket. But where I was in the game, just a few hours in, it seems like, okay, that's a hurdle that I'm not going to get across switching to casual mode. I'm out.
Yeah, but even then, like permadeath with the GBA titles, it's not really it's not a hard thing. I mean, I think a lot of people with permadeath, they look at it and they're just like, oh man, if I lose a unit, I lose them forever and I can't get them back. And the thing is that the game kind of babies you just a little bit, especially, Blazing Sword. Like if you lose one of your mages early on, you'll get another powerful mage way later down the line. And same thing with your archers. I mean, and the thing is, sometimes you'll get units and you will never use them at all. Like, I'm trying to think of someone who I'd never use. Maybe Rebecca or Will. They're not really fantastic.
No, they aren't. The people who always rode my bench were usually like the pre-promotes that you get later on, but the reason they're there is if you lose people early on, you can have someone who can actually go into the battle and be competent if you need them to be. You don't have a revival fountain like in Echoes.
Yeah, I mean, I just like I don't know. I see a lot of people who play like more the more recent titles, and they're like, "Well, I can't go back and play these games because they have permadeath." And I think they make permadeath this huge, giant mountain that they just can't overcome, and they instantly throw their hands up and they're just like, "Well, I can't do it, permadeath." And I think that's just like the wrong way to look at it. I mean,
yeah, but I've always played as like a challenge. It's like, oh, someone died, completely restart. I'm going to play this out perfectly. I'm going to get the Silent Assassin bonus and Hitman. I'm going to perfect this. I have to perfect this. They all have to live.
Well, you see, when I first started, like I mentioned in the prologue that I mentioned it in the prologue. At least I believe I did. That my first game was the Sacred Stones, and I didn't understand permadeath. So I was like, oh, this person's gone, whatever. But then I noticed, like, after I'd saved and gone on to the next map, I'm like, oh, they're dead for real. I was just like, okay. And so then I had to basically kind of plan my moves better. I couldn't just, send one person into a group of enemies and, fold my hands up and be like, okay, well, they're just going to come back whenever. No, I feel like it makes you a little bit of a stronger player when you have to balance that risk reward. Yeah, I could send this person into this area of enemies, but what's the risk?
I loved it. Just like I had played Advance Wars before I played Fire Emblem, and in that one, the cost of like, oh, I'm sending this infantry unit just charging in. Oh, he lost. Oh, that's a 1,000 coins down the drain. Not a big loss. It's an inconvenience, but not a real loss. In this one, in Fire Emblem, it's an inconvenience, and it is a huge blow to your army if you're losing soldiers.
Especially if said soldier has a legendary weapon in their hands, and they die because you lose that weapon too.
I don't want to lose my thief. I don't want to lose that lockpick.
Yeah, so, but yeah, when I was playing Sacred Stones, I went through just, if they died, it was just kind of like, well, they died, whatever, I'll just go on. I only had one exception to that rule. Joshua will never die. Actually, I'm lying. My best playthrough of Sacred Stones does not have Joshua in it, as I got cheap shotted. I was just like, no. So Marissa had to pick up the slack, and I'm just like, this is forever a black mark on this playthrough.
Can't believe you let him die. It was all your fault.
Now he'll never get to return home to Gienna and rule the king. Let's not do this. Anyways. But yeah, I mean, those are, some strong ways to get started with that podcast.
Hey, that's what we're doing now.
Oh man. No, but those are what we think are like basically the best ways to get into the series. So, I did not mention Path of Radiance because while it does mean the things that the other games do as far as tutorials and teaching you how to play and all that good stuff, the price is ridiculous for the most part.
Oh, what? You don't have an extra $100 burning in your pocket to go out to a local mom and pop store and spend it on a GameCube game?
And then a GameCube memory card.
Over a decade ago?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so I mean, Path of Radiance is also a really strong title, and it is a one you could really play through and have fun with. But again, the cost going into it is not worth your time, which actually kind of brings you to that game's sequel, which is Radiant Dawn for the Wii. It's not a good title to start with either because it's a direct sequel to Radiant Dawn. I'm sorry, Path of Radiance. Get my titles mixed up.
That's not the reason. That's not the reason that game is bad. Like, it as a sequel is actually not terrible, but the things it does with some of the mechanics, specifically with some of the characters, is actually horrifically bad. it makes me just not want to touch that game ever again.
Actually, I've played through it once, and I've never touched it again. I even traded it off. I don't even have it anymore.
Same. I'm sure I have it in some box somewhere.
We'll talk about Radiant Dawn someday.
Yeah, one day. I don't look forward to that day. Although maybe I'll fall in love with it or something. Who knows? Maybe I've changed. I've changed my ways. You have to believe me.
It's possible. I mean, like, you know, people have now kind of come around that game and be like, "Oh man, it's so good, it's so great." I'm just like, I had a horrible time with this game. So, I think that is actually, you know, we actually missed one game. What about Shadow Dragon for the Nintendo DS?
I'd say no. I hate the art style. I think it's the ugliest game in the franchise, one of the ugliest games on the DS. I absolutely despised watching the sprites move around, and I don't love that it doesn't have some of the mechanics I love in Fire Emblem, with the characters actually having support and having conversations and talking to each other and being more individuals rather than faceless members of an army. They felt like faceless members of an army in that game, and they should, because it was an NES game originally. But if you're doing the whole remake thing, if you're going all out and making it a whole new game, I wish they had taken more of the modern things and put it into that.
I agree with you, but then I was just kind of thinking, like, you know, what about if this is actually someone's first Fire Emblem? They have no sort of like expectations, and even then I was just like, well, it's still an ugly game. Those sprites, those, like, even the portraits are not really that great. It's just like, you know, you have a character like Nina, or Nina, however you properly say her name, who's basically kind of like, I don't want to say pouring her heart out, but she's talking about another character who she feels, you know, especially strong about. Don't want to spoil it for you just yet. But she's talking about a character that she feels extremely passionate towards, but she has like the most blank expression on her face. And I'm just like, I can't really get behind you and what you're trying to tell me.
I just hate the character designs in that one so much. All the characters look like they're made of Play-Doh, like days old Play-Doh.
Yeah.
I can't stand looking at them. Although I'll probably play it again one day. Maybe my mind will change. It's been a long time since I've played it.
I actually played it on the Wii U when it went for sale. I was just like, you know what? I need this under my belt. And I like Marth. And the game made me actually like Marth a hell of a lot more too. So there's always that.
I forgot that the Wii U actually did finally start using the dual screens that they should have been using for a long time. Wish they'd done more DS stuff on the Wii U, but
it's not.
Can complain about the Wii U some other day.
It's not the best way to play that game. But you know what? We'll talk about that game in the future as well. There's a lot we have to talk about, but we're going to move on to our second to last thing. So, when Cardwiz and I came up with this podcast, one of the things we really talked about with the franchise is that we love the characters for this. And the big part of those characters are their support conversations. And so we decided at the end of it, you know, we're either going to pick a character support conversation, or like a memory prism, if we're talking about echoes. Or if we're talking about heroes, we're going to talk about the level 40 conversations. And so we each picked one to go with. And mine's actually going to be leading into something. So I want to let Cardwiz talk about a support between Owain and Lucina.
Yes. During the prologue, I felt that I was a little too negative on the 3DS games, and I do like them for the most part, and I want to be positive. I want to show a good example. Awakenings had the children mechanic, and while I did have some problems with it, it did some things well. And one thing I liked was the relationship between Owain and Lucina. Owain is this over-the-top character. On the surface, he can seem like just this big, over-the-top anime trope, which sadly the 3DS games are sort of littered with. But Owain has enough conversations that grounds him enough to make him feel more real. And his conversations with Lucina are some of my favorites. He doesn't address Lucina, his cousin, as in the complete over-the-top manner. He tries to act like a quote normal person around her, and Lucina sees this and is basically tells him, "No, be yourself. I don't like seeing you like this. Are you feeling all right?" And Owain just admits that he knows how to act. I like that he's being himself when he's acting over the top, but he's not an insane person. He's not crazy. He's just a over the top character, and he embraces that. It makes him feel a little more human. He's still a little tropey, but he feels more like a human being after this conversation. Not only that, we get a little bit of lore on the side. We learn a little bit about Lucina the Falchion. We learn a little bit more about the history of the blade and how while the blade itself is passed along through the generations, like the sword itself has to go through maintenance and stuff like that, with the handle and the hilt and the sheath of it. And in the conversation, Owain sort of gives Lucina a tutorial, gives her help about how to actually maintain the blade, since the blade is something that he is a master of. It's something he is an expert on. And I love that we get to see a little bit more humanity between these two. It makes me like these characters. It's why these two are probably my favorite of the second generation in Awakening. I think it's a good conversation that fleshes them out. And that's what I want from a support conversation. I want to love these characters more going out of the conversation than I did going in, and the Lucina Owain support is a good example of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my favorite part of this support chain between these two is when, as cousins, they marry.
No, please, no. They would. They don't. No. He just gives her a very special sheet. That's all it does. That's all it is. It's just very special friendship sheet.
No, I'm just messing. Please don't tune out. I'm not that. No, my favorite part of this is when they actually are talking about, the legacy of the sword, and it kind of gives you a little bit more into Owain's character, because we know that Owain basically goes through all the weapons, and he's like, I'm going to name this weapon and this weapon and that weapon. But there are a couple of times where he mentions like some armor things, and I think some of his other supports where he's like, oh yeah, an archer's jerkin is like this and like that. So it kind of gives you like this image that, oh yeah, he's kind of a weapons expert. And I actually had a little theory about this, in that before Awakening, the Falchion, is that how you say it? Yeah, Falchion.
I say Falchion. I don't know the proper way.
Crap, I'm almost like an idiot. Yeah, no way, it's called Falchion because they say it in echoes. But yeah, the Falchion has been passed down from male to male to male, and I think part of the old lore for the titles was that it can only be wielded by a male. So Lucina is actually the first female that actually wields this. So my personal theory was that Owain, being of Marth's bloodline, by way of being Crom's sister, his mother being Crom's sister.
Yes. Owain is not the sister. Unless...
Well, listen, we don't...
I can write that fanfic. I can do it.
But yeah, so basically, like, my personal theory was that he actually wielded it first, or was training to wield it, but then, like, maybe like the death of his mother and father, maybe that took like some kind of toll on him, and suddenly he felt that he couldn't wield that blade anymore, so then Lucina took it up instead, and that's why he knows about the maintenance and the history and stuff.
It's possible. It leaves it open so you can have your own headcanon to it, and that is a solid one. That's a nice one. And I would actually, and I don't want to get too much into like fantasy moms and dads and things for like the second gen, but I was just thinking, like, when Lissa approaches when Lissa approaches Lon Ku, like, he doesn't have his typical girl, get away, I'm scared, like he does in his support. I mean, he does
he does tell her off originally when they first meets him in Ferox, but after that, in their supports, they seem to kind of get together pretty nicely. So I was just thinking, like, if a warrior like Lon Ku, who is known for his swordsmanship, was the father of Owain, I was just like, it would make sense that he was like kind of a sword master. Well, yeah, he does promote to a sword master, but it would probably make sense that he knows how to wield a sword and things like that. And that could have played into, why he was originally chosen for the Falchion, because his father was a good swordsman. So that's a little bit of a headcanon, I guess.
It's possible. I don't think I ever read Lissa and Long Q's support, but it does make sense from a unit standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably have to go back and read their supports, but I was thinking about that could make sense. And then, oh yeah, I forgot the A part of the support is kind of where you get the comedy part of it from Lucina, where she's like, I now call the sword Pointy Demon Spanker, and Owain's like, what? Owain, the person who gives the ridiculous names, is like, you can't call the Falchion Demon Spanker.
Yeah. These words, these names that he's coming up with, aren't just coming off the top of his head. He puts a weird, obsessive amount of thought into them.
Yeah, I think when we see a character that is totally not him in Fire Emblem Fates, there is a weapon called Odin's Grimoire, and it's supposedly a journal with all of his weapon names in it. I mean, that is if they were the same character, not that they are the same character.
Absolutely not. No way. Totally doesn't hurt my head in confusion of what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm definitely
not complaining about Fates. I'm not going to do that today. Not doing it.
All right, so now let's talk. Since we basically kind of went through the C through A support, let's talk about that S support.
No, we don't acknowledge that. They're just friends. They're just cousins. He just gave her a sheath. That doesn't mean anything.
Actually, I have the support pulled up.
She can put her sword into it. That means nothing.
I have the support pulled up right here, and the whole sheath thing is part of the S support card was.
I know. I'm reading it right now. And we're not doing Fire Emblem support Masterpiece Theater. We're not going to play that out, I don't think, unless people request that for some reason.
A thoughtful gesture, Owain, but Falchion already has a sheath. No.
No. No.
So, yeah, we'll end that there. It's so
no incest, even though lots of the games sort of imply it a little bit. No, we won't.
We're not going to get all genealogy of the Holy War on this one. No thanks. But anyways,
what's your support?
So I mean, like, if you were to give the support a rating, let's say an emblem rating, how many emblems out of 5 would you give the support?
Out of 5, I'd give this a good 4. It's a very strong support, I think. Like I said, gives a little bit of lore to one of the most important things in the Fire Emblem universe with the Falchion. It makes Owain more of a human and lets Lucina interact a little bit more, so she's less of a 2D bland character.
Yeah, I agree with you with everything you said. I give it a 4-star as well, mostly because we get to see a different side of Owain, and Lucina kind of like, kind of reinforces, that, she is the Falchion's chosen wielder, rather than just someone who's like, oh, I have to wield the sword now. And with that, I guess we'll move on to my support, which I didn't choose a support. I mentioned that we will also talk about some of the level 40 heroes quotes, and I chose one because it's going to play into something we're going to announce in just a moment. But with that said, if you all have any support pairing conversations that you want to talk about, send us one and we'll look over it. So we'll do Cardwiz will pick a support, I'll pick a support, and then we'll talk about one of the supports that you the viewer listens to. So a little way to get y'all involved in this process. So when Fire Emblem Heroes was first announced, they had something called the Choose Your Legends, and so everyone was to vote on about like 99% of the characters in the game, in the entire franchise, and they were going to get like a special costume and a special unit in the game. And Roy came in number 2 for the males, and so they gave him a special they gave him a special costume based on his father, Eliwood, and he actually wields his father's sword and stuff. And his level 40 conversation is it's very nice. It's probably one of my favorite things. It really gives him some context as a character, and so I'm going to read that out. Quote, "When I was young, Marcus, a knight who had long served my family, told me many tales about my father. He spoke of the heroic things my father did in his younger days, the many allies he met on his travels, and he told me how my parents first met. I would get so excited hearing those stories. I looked forward to them far more than any other tale. That's why I admire my father so much. He's my hero. I may resemble him, but I have so much to learn, and I have to get a lot stronger before I can truly claim to be like him. But if I stay by your side, I'm sure I'll be able to accomplish that goal. I promise you I'll continue to do my best." End quote. I really like this. I think it's very heartwarming for Roy, and we get references to Marcus and Fire Emblem 7. There's really not much to say other than I give this a 5 out of 5 emblems.
It's great. It brings a smile to my face. It makes me think of the stories. It makes me think of Fire Emblem 7. It makes me think of Fire Emblem 6 and those connections. Because Roy is isn't just a face from Smash Brothers. Roy is the son of a lord who saved the world, and Roy goes out to save the world on his own with his friends. One generation later, it's nice to see that sort of thing referenced with a father-son sort of thing. I love it. I just have a big old smile on my face.
Yeah. Which brings us to the thing that Cardwiz and I wanted to talk about doing. Cardwiz, we're both professional wrestling fans, aren't we?
100%.
Professional wrestling is known for stealing its gimmicks from other wrestlers, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So let me tell you something, brother. We're stealing another gimmick. So, one thing that I know that the Game Informer podcast does is that they have something called the Game Club. Basically, they'll take a game, whether it's a past game or a current game, they'll play through so much of it, and then they'll talk about what they've played with their audience, and they'll get opinions, and they'll read emails and stuff like that. So, I figured that Cardwiz and I should steal this gimmick. Claim it as our own. 100% original, in fact. So, we are starting what's called the Emblem Club, because we're original. And we're going to be playing through some various Fire Emblem games. And so we wanted to start with 7. You know, it turned 15 this year. And so we wanted to look back on the game that started the international craze, well, as far as Fire Emblem goes. And so we decided we're going to play through... Sorry, what chapters was it again? I didn't actually write the chapters down.
We're going to start by playing Eliwood's story. We're not going to do the Lyn hard mode tutorial to make our unit stronger. We're going to start with Eliwood normal mode, and we're going to go chapter 11 through 16. 16 is the where they've taken going back into Caitlin and taking back the Marquis castle. It's the chapter where you end up getting Raven and Lucius back.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that when it comes to it. I just for whatever reason I forgot to write the chapters down. Yeah, well,
that's a good chunk. That's a decent chunk, and it's starting to get into the chapters where you have to put a little bit more thought into movements. It starts getting a little bit hard, and we're just playing on normal mode. We want to have as many units on the field as possible. We want to, since this is our first playthrough that we're going through with you guys out there, we want it to just sort of be nice and fun.
Yeah, and then we'll do a brief write up of Lyn's story and Lyn modes. That way we have some reference points for Lyn when she eventually shows back up.
Mm-hmm. And as we're playing along with the game, we'll be telling the stories about, oh, this character Kent came from behind and he ended up saving Lynn in this spectacular fashion, or oh my goodness, I can't believe it, Florina got 1% crit on a lightning bolt. I can't believe it. Those are the kind of stories I love to share with people. I personally, I love listening to sports podcasts. I love fantasy football talk. I know some people are in the minority. I love hearing the tough beats of how people got screwed over, and I love hearing in conversations I've had with you over the many years that we've known each other and played Fire Emblem so many times. I love the stories of how one character ends up becoming a god in a playthrough that we never would have expected, or how someone gets RNG screwed. I think these are the things that just help bond people together. These quote gaming war stories, so to speak.
And send us your comments from your playthrough. Maybe you had someone that became a god who wasn't supposed to be, or maybe you had an unbelievable save or something like that, and we'll read it out in the podcast. We're always interested in hearing what you got to say.
And plus, we just get to play good games over and over again, and it gives me an excuse to play this game again, even though I was probably going to play it again anyway.
Oh man,
it's going to give me a reason to revisit games I haven't either played in forever, wouldn't give another chance. Maybe we'll do Shadow Dragon one day. Maybe I'll finally give that one a chance. Maybe I'll give Fates another chance.
Maybe I'll actually get to play this copy of Fire Emblem Path of Radiance that I just bought.
Oh, your poor wallet.
Mm-hmm. Give me a reason to play Fire Emblem. And give me a reason to play Fire Emblem Radiant, Path of Radiance. I never need a reason to play.
Make me play that.
I never need a reason to play Fire Emblem, but yeah, I want to revisit these games. I want to chit chat about them, the units, and all the things that come with it. So I know it's probably during a tough time because, oh boy, January games. And
games are coming out,
and Smash is here too. So
hopefully we'll finish up this one in time. By the time we finish up Fire Emblem 7, we'll either move on to another old game, or maybe we'll have some news on Three Houses by that point, so we can start planning around that one.
Definitely interested in see what's coming out. I think our future is pretty bright with this podcast.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff coming around the corner. Worst case scenario, we get to play some old Fire Emblem games. Oh no.
How terrible. Yeah. Well, I think that does it for this chapter, Cardwiz. Ready to get out of here?
Ready to get out of here. I think we just leveled up. I think we got a good one.
Me too. So
I think, sadly, my rambling point leveled up, but oh well. I'll work on that in the future.
That's all right. We're all getting started here. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can follow us at Emblem Supports on Twitter, or you can email us at, yes, I remembered the email this time, at emblempodcast@gmail.com. And, well, Cardwiz, together, we ride. Let's get out of here.